She's away.
So,
She did. She was on the online meeting.
oh, okay, the provision on this.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Housing and Community Select Committee. I am Councillor Claire Simmons, Chair of the committee, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. This event is being streamed live on YouTube, and members of the public and the media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and listen to the discussions taking place. Now, I'd like to welcome all those in Committee Room 1 at Kensington Town Hall and everyone watching on YouTube. Before we proceed with the meeting, I would ask members of the committee to please make sure your mobiles are on silent or switched off. And we will start with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Thank you. So item 1 is apologies for absence, and we have received apologies from Councillor Joanna Gardner and Councillor Linda Wade. Have we received any other further apologies? No. Declarations of interest. Does any member have an interest to declare? In which case we'll move to item 3, which is the minutes. Does the committee agree to sign the minutes of the previous meetings as a correct record? Agreed. And so there's a slight change to the published agenda now, in that we are going to go straight to item 5, leasehold service charges. I want to make it clear about why this item has come to the committee, which is namely on the basis of the widespread concerns from residents, leaseholders that have been raised with me through the TCC and through the homeowners panel. And I also just want to mention, for a piece of context.
Mike, there.
Pardon?
Mike, we can't hear you.
I'll speak up then.
Yeah, please.
And I also wanted to just mention for a context that this comes to the committee at a time when there is also some national campaigning about service charges in registered providers, that some reports are finding maladministration there. So we're not going to find that here, I'm sure. But I just wanted to make that aware that that was a background to this issue here that we're going to be looking at. So the report that we have describes the system and the process for calculating service charges for leaseholders and tenants. The costs have recently increased significantly, bringing into question the transparency of the process and the accuracy of the charges. We have a number of residents in attendance tonight, and I would like to invite those present to share their experiences or concerns with the committee before we ask questions of the lead member. For any residents not able to be here tonight and who are watching online, I would invite you to share your thoughts by email to scrutiny@rbkc.gov.uk. So if any residents would like to approach the table here and take a seat, if anybody would like to speak on this item. Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm Robert Graham, a leaseholder on the Wormsend Estate in Chelsea. And my family have been tenants and then leaseholders since 1952. So we've experienced every form of housing management that's existed post-war. In the last 2 years, the KCTMO, which succeeded the TMO, as people aren't aware of that, I managed to persuade the senior leaseholder manager, David Wood, to actually provide an accompanying explanation to service charges, particularly where there were significant differences from 1 year to the next, and to offer some sort of prediction about what would happen the following year. This has never occurred during the period of us being managed by housing management. And in fact, the only thing we've ever received, which was last year, was, of course, you've read in the media about how energy prices are going to increase, and we knew about that. There's been absolutely not a single word of explanation about the over 60% of increases in service charges and commensurate increases in rents for the residents on housing management and housing portfolio. Well, I just want to bring that to people's attention, and when we talk about transparency, that's just the beginning. I've tried to make many other points, and I've actually presented them in writing. It's really too detailed for me to go here. They're really not worrying concerns, not necessarily. I mean, unfortunately, the management of housing has not been free of criminality. We're not suggesting that, but we are suggesting that there's something very wrong about the distribution of costs across the council, and in particular towards the residents of its public housing portfolio.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I too would like to raise the matter of service charge in my flat. My name is Thomas Decker. I'm a resident of Shaftesbury Place, a block of flats owned by Notting Hill Genesis. In March this year, Notting Hill Genesis raised our service charge from £205 a month to £615 a month, an increase of 3 times, or an extra £410 a month. When we looked at the reason for the increase, we found that Notting Hill Genesis had charged us £375,000 per year for building insurance instead of the previous £15,000 a year, or 25 times as much. Notting Hill Genesis claimed this rise was because Shaftesbury Place was at a high risk of fire. I Grenfell. In October last year, Notting Hill Genesis sent all residents a letter stating that they had carried out a fire risk assessment and found that Shaftesbury Place was at a high risk of fire and they would carry out remedial work. They also said that we would not have to pay for this work. I am an architect of almost 40 years experience and qualified to be a fire assessor, although I do not practice as a fire assessor. And in fact, I'm speaking to you only as a resident this evening. I knew that this conclusion was highly dubious, given my experience and qualifications. After a struggle, during which I pointed out it was a criminal offence under the Building Safety Act to withhold a fire assessment from a resident, and I managed to get the fire assessment from Notting Hill Genesis. I found that Notting Hill Genesis had misstated the height of the building and the number of stories, so Shaftesbury Place automatically appeared on the register of high-risk buildings. If the correct height and number of stories is used, Shaftesbury Place is automatically considered a low-risk building under the Building Safety Act. I have asked Notting Hill Genesis repeatedly to measure the building again, but they have not done so far. In fact, I even asked them to come down and measure the building with me, but they declined. I also managed to obtain insurance documents under the Leasehold and Tenant Act from Notting Hill Genesis and found that there were in fact two insurance certificates for the present year, one for £7,500 and the other for £371,500 a year, a total of almost £379,000, or fractionally more than the £375,000 we were being charged. These insurance certificates appear to show that residents of Shaftesbury Place are paying for the insurance for Shaftesbury Place, our building, the Tesco supermarket underneath, and the building site of 100 Cromwell Road next door. It appears that Notting Hill Genesis took out this insurance in November and did not tell us about it in their estimate of our service charge in December. They waited until the end of March this year, just before we were due to pay the new amount on the 1st of April, to tell us it was all above board and we would have to pay. I have asked Notting Hill Genesis repeatedly for an explanation of why Tesco and 100 West Cromwell Road appear on our insurance certificates, and if they are split, for an apportionment document, but they have not given one so far. In any case, once the building returns to the low risk category under the Building Safety Act, where it has been for the last 25 years, Notting Hill Genesis will not be able to use this as an excuse to charge 25 times the insurance. Notting Hill Genesis have told us repeatedly that they have full confidence in the risk assessment and that the insurance is apportioned without showing us any documentation. We need answers from Notting Hill Genesis and we need our £410 back. I have sent a more detailed statement of facts to the chair, who has kindly agreed to circulate them to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that illustrates the point I was making about the issue around registered providers. So thank you for coming and sharing that. Would any other member of the public like to speak to the committee on the issue? Please. Hi.
My name is Mario. I'm a leaseholder in 69 St. Quentin Avenue. It's a small block of flat of 12 flats. We've been experiencing last year a sharp increase in service charges. And when I looked into the details, some were up, some went down, but majority of this increase was related to the cleaning and maintenance services. That's a staggering increase of 45%, which can be understandable under the current circumstances, but still have to believe, especially considering that particular service for our block is below standard. We always complain that there have numerous records of email and reports for the quality of the cleaning and the maintenance of the block. So seeing that particular voice in the service charge, such a massive increase, it raised questions, which I did. I received a breakdown of the cost, and I highlighted numerous things. I've been in touch with one of the council representatives. Like there was numerous calls for like out of hours calls, like night calls, just to check. And they were saying nothing to report, and it was charged us £88 plus VAT because we could see a night out calls. So my question is, considering this small environment is not a large estate, it's just a small block, are these regular call out of time required? Can this be included in the regular maintenance to check if the lights are on or not working? Why having to pay £88 for just somebody coming in and 10 minutes and work out?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Would any other member of the public resident like to come and speak to the committee, please? Yes.
My name is Carol Cotton. I come from Tavistock Crescent Committee of our Residents Association. and with the fellow member. We get or have had, in terms of the amounts, an estimated charge 22-23 of final accounts for 22-23. Then we jump to estimated service charges 23-24. And then we go to estimated service charges 24-25. When I spoke to or tried to speak to somebody in the office on Thursday last week, Diana is away until the 20th. The other person was on the phone, and a very nice man was trying to help me, but eventually couldn't. So he said, Sam, whoever he might be, would call me back to explain. Because the figures change up and down all over the place. Do we have an increase? Yes, we do. On my particular flat, 22-23, it was 1,400 in round figures. And then in the estimate for 23-24, it went up to 2,100. And 24-25 is now closer to 2,600. So it's very confusing because I cannot, from this document that I get, establish what actually happened in 23-24. I have only got the estimate, and that estimate was sent out on the 21st of March 23. So I asked, when do we see the final accounts? October, said the man on the phone. I said, beg your pardon. October, 6 months later? Oh, yes. They always come out 6 months after the estimates and the end of that year. Now, I have run businesses, and I've never known it that we can't really have accounts that work or balance or change. For example, just giving you a random gallop round the houses. In the building costs estimate services for 23-24, cleaning and caretaking, which of building costs was 26,000. And then, I don't know why, but in the estimate for 24-25, it went to 3,000. So have we not got anybody looking after us? And then if you go to the estate costs of cleaning and caretaking in the estate costs for 23-24, they were 21,000, and the estimates for 24-25, 47,000. So it's bizarre. It's not clear. It's not easy to follow, and we have the increases just going up. That's where I leave it with you. I don't want to speak to Sam because it's now a few days and he hasn't bothered to call me. Maybe I'll have to wait till Yana comes back. But something somewhere is just adrift, if it could be corrected.
Thank you very much. Would any other member of the public like to speak to the committee on this issue? Please come.
Hi, my name is Marwa. I'm a resident of Tadima Road. So there's two things. One on the service charge. I've realized in our building, firstly, it's a Victorian house because it's a flat, that the house hadn't had any sort of maintenance or cleaning for over 15 years in the communal area. I've raised this with the council. We've been paying our service charges every year. It's been going up. And we've been told that apparently the communal cleaning is not included in the service charges, which is in breach of every law I know, including the lease household that I have. I've raised this with the council, I've raised a complaint and got absolutely nowhere. They don't seem to acknowledge what is covered in the leasehold, and it's quite shocking actually. The gentleman I spoke to, well, it was raised, it was called Doug Goldberg, I think, and he's the head of RBK management. So that's the first issue on the service charge. Secondly, there was cyclical work that was done by the council. which when we initially got the estimates, it assigned my property to have, remembering this is a Victorian house consisting of 2 flats, £35,000. Because there has been absolutely no technical work done for over 20 years in the building. And this got awarded to a company called Mulali Contractors in 2021, October. Mulali had a court case against them by a housing association that was announced earlier in the year because of failure on the planning side. Now, when the award was contracted in October, that case was already known. The actual judgment came out in September before the award was actually, the contract was awarded to them, and it found them guilty and they had to pay £14 million fine. That was not picked up by RBKC when they awarded the contract for some odd reason, which when I raised it, again, they claimed that it wasn't public news, but I sent them public links showing that it was awarded. The whole Mulali contract was over 2 years, way over the estimate timeline. At many periods during that work, we would actually have absolutely no builders around on site. So it was meant to be 8 months, it went over 15 months, the work. Then we got an estimate of the work that now was supposed to cost 35,000, is costing me £70,000 in cyclical work. Due to failures on Mulali to actually do the work in according to the timeline, which big part of that, the council should have known there's a lot of failures on that contractor. Now, I would presume as a council, you actually have a procurement process where you're able to access if a certain contractor has outstanding issues with the housing association, with RBKC, or any other housing association in the country. Why were these checks not done? And why was the contract awarded to a company that was already legally liable to pay £14 million fine? And why should I pay £70,000 now in cyclical work? So these are the 2 points that I'd like to raise to the committee.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to speak to the committee? Please raise your hand. No? Oh, David, please.
I'm David from Lancaster West Estate, East Oldham Estate. We are currently engaged in a challenge to our service charges on the estate, because last year there was a swingingly massive increase in them. I mean, the council said though this has been driven by an increase in the gas costs, and we have a temporary boiler still running 7 years after the Grenfell Tower fire on our estate, on one part of the estate. But on further investigation, we thought, well, it would be best to get all of the invoices so we can establish exactly what we're being billed for. That was sent through, that took till September, I think, for us to get the invoices. We've been looking diligently through them and have replied to the housing team with our points, because in those invoices, we found numerous examples of misbilling. For example, we were charged works revolving around the anniversary of the Grenfell Tower fire. We were charged for works around the Grenfell Tower fire that weren't actually on our estate and which are provided as part of the social value by one of the contractors there anyway. We were charged for contracted works twice in the same invoices. I have to pass this email on to Councillor Simmons, and it'd be great if perhaps if you could share it with the committee, because I don't want to spend all evening listing numerous faults. But we're still awaiting reply from the Home Ownership team. They're continuously saying we are looking into it, we will get back to you. I can understand there's a lot of work, but one of the issues we have already had is we weren't given all of the invoices requested. There's over £19,000 worth of gardening works, which isn't billed for. And how are we able as residents to form an assessment of what's been done and what we're receiving as services on the estate when we can't even see the bills, or maybe the Home Ownership team have actually lost them? I don't know. We haven't received any individual billing for the gas costs, because all we received from the council was the gas costs for the whole borough. And then we have a division of what that's been billed at. But there is no real explanation of how that billing is arrived at, who takes the readings. Maybe the gas providers take the readings and just tell the council this is how much gas is being used. So we don't have much confidence actually in what's being done. And one of the last points, which all of my residents and all of the people on the estate feel very strongly about, is the fact that we're still living in what is effectively a building site with the remains of the tower in the centre of our estate. There's continual building work and disruption because of that, and yet the council are insisting we're receiving normal services. For example, my front door opener hasn't worked for 7 years since the fire happened. So I begin to find it difficult to understand what I'm actually paying for in service charges. Straight after the fire, the council made sure there was discounts for the residents because they said there aren't normal services. And I don't understand how now, 7 years later, with pretty much the same levels of disruption, they can start saying that it's all fine, we should be paying full charges. And that applies to both rent and service charges on my estate. But I think there's a bigger issue across the whole of RBKC in that there is no transparency. I mean, this is a nationwide problem, really, looking at people, but there's not much transparency on bills, and there isn't really any incentive for the council to care because ultimately they pass the cost on to you. So if the contractor provides them with an invoice that is sky high, they pay the invoice, then they charge you for it. So I would like to see more accountability in what works are being provided for what it's being paid for. One of the invoices we had on our estate was for 2 wire repairs and an adjustment, which was all connected to the lightning conductor, £3,000 for someone to spend half an hour tightening a few screws and doing a bit of soldering. So I'd like to know what justification there is for these charges. If there isn't in what they have sent us, then they didn't give us full transparent disclosure of what's being done. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to speak to the committee? Please raise your hand. No. So in that case, I would like to thank everybody who's come and shared their experience with us. It's just been very helpful, and I think we've all heard again the issues around transparency and accuracy. And so saying, I would now like to welcome the lead member and any supporting officers to the table to comment on the report and ask questions from the committee.
Thank you, Chair, for that. That was very interesting, and I just want to officially apologise for some of those issues which we will definitely be picking up. And I know Doug was writing lots of notes, so we're definitely following up on individual. There's some individual cases where we're going
Can I just say this, although we have quite a lot of residents here present tonight, what we've heard is really a small snapshot of the issues that I'm aware of. So hopefully we can look into those.
Yeah, no, definitely. And my inbox definitely is very full about this. And one of the things before was Doug and Jana are going to go into it in greater depth. I'm sure the committee will have lots of questions. But one of the things that really struck me was looking at the challenges. And on page 51, item 5.35, talking about challenges which we can't control, and some of the charges, the energy was up 330% the year before, and insurance up 100%. And in the back of the pack, just regarding the insurance, because we've had a lot of correspondence about the insurance. Just I wanted us to set out to the councillors, and this is obviously public, about what we have tried to do with the insurance industry. Sadly, to no avail this year, but we are keeping all our communications open, and as I said, I've been in touch with ministers as well about this. So that is something that we are really, really mindful of. But I know that's just part of the picture, but it is a huge part of the insurance aspect, is a huge part. But anyway, Chair, over to Doug and Jana, or
shall I say a few things? Because I'm sure you may well have read the report.
We have.
Question. So what the report is a summary of how service charges are calculated and some of the challenges that go with that. But clearly, from what we've heard, we've got to do better in terms of making it really clear about why a charge is the charge that it is. But also be quite clear that there is a more open disputes process should people be unhappy with that charge. We meet as officers who because sometimes you get things wrong. We might send out the wrong bill. We may realise that something hasn't really stood up to the quality that we were expecting it to. So we make a number of adjustments because under the Landlord and Tenant Act, any charge that we make needs to be reasonable. So we spend a lot of time trying to assess what that is. So we only really pass on charges which we think are, I mean, we don't really have a choice under the terms of the legislation. We should, our fiduciary duty is to make sure that we do pass these charges on. But we want to make sure that they do comply legally with what's set out. All charges are challengeable, and must make sure that we've got a process that leaseholders feel is working for them and not for us, because it's ultimately something that we need to take on. So that's what I've heard today, and it is something we've worked on, but we've got more work to do. It might be worth, if you've got any questions on the paper. I've got Jana. Jana, do you want to say?
Oh, I'm Jana Dupree. I'm head of environmental. Carol referred to me. I'm back from holiday today, Carol. But yes, so it's my team who would collate the charges from everywhere, from all the service providers, and we'll do the calculations, put the invoices together and issue those. And then my team also responsible for the collection of the service charges. So we are a holistic service for leaseholders, if you like, if they have a lease extension or lease alteration, or want to do alterations to their properties, they'll come to us. So, but we don't deal with the neighbourhood aspect. So we don't deal with relationships within the building, ASB, antisocial behaviour, that type of thing. That's up with our neighbourhood colleagues.
Thank you. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say something again, because I thought the report was very helpful in terms of laying how it all works out. But again, what we had tonight from residents, we've got to do some serious work on our, looking at, again, 5.34 on our systems. I was surprised to see we have 3 different systems that are in play. You know, this may be one of the complications Jana is having, and what David said about, you know, difficulty in tracking down invoices. I mean, in this day and age, we should be a lot better at that. So that's something that's definitely going to be on.
So we are replacing the IVC system with Oracle, and our financial system should change next spring, and hopefully that make a difference, because the actual ledger, financial ledger, sits outside, doesn't talk to the system that we raise repairs on. That's fundamentally an issue for us.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions sent from Councillor Wade, who unfortunately couldn't be here, which I will read out. And Councillor Bay, you've mentioned this. The issue of buildings insurance has impacted many leaseholders, and there are specific questions that have been raised. Some other boroughs have sourced more than one provider for insurance quotations. It's understood that this is a tri-borough policy: London Borough, Hammersmith, Fulham, RBKC and Westminster. But what consideration has been made about the different types of properties in the council stock, estates and street properties? There is also the issue of 5 or 6 RBKC freeholder properties that fall within the commercial property portfolio and are managed by an external company. And finally, why was the sign up for 5 years? This is about the insurance contract.
So you're not best qualified to answer specifically on insurance. Ray Chitty oversees council's insurance, but there are.
I can absolutely categorically say that all of those questions Linda has asked have already been asked by in the home ownership committee. We have particularly about insurance with Ray Chitty answered. So we can find those answers.
So we did go out to tender twice. We did go out to tender twice, and we only got one bidder, same bidder both times, to try and market moving. And it is across London an issue for all of us.
Councillor McVeigh, you said you have been had some discussion with ministers about this.
Yes, sadly we didn't really get quite the response we were hoping for, but we have been told that they're going to be looking at it. But I suppose there's probably a limit to what a government can do with a whole sector, insurance sector. You know, but it is on their radar, and we are definitely working with them.
Thanks very much indeed. And I come at this with a bit of my personal knowledge, because I've lived in private leasehold flats with share of freeholds for the last 25 years. And in the first of those flats, I managed the building, and therefore I've done the calculations that you've done from a small building, not for an estate though. So I do appreciate there's a difference in scale. So my first question is, when you're doing the calculations, to what extent do you attribute the charges to an individual building like 25 Tadham Road? I apologise if that's the exact address of the lady, or is it to all the houses in the Lancaster West Estate, all the properties in Lancaster West Estate? How do you work?
Very much depending on the lease. So if the lease states that Tadham Road is a block or a building, and we refer to a block, then the cost only for that building is associated to the building. On Lancaster West Estate, there are different estates as we have it in the service charge rule. So 3 blocks would be 1 estate. So all the costs will be associated with the estate. It depends if you have Wills End, for instance, well then estate, the entire estate is a block according to the lease. So all the costs are spread out across all the residents there. But you could have instances where there's an estate, and it now escapes me which one is a good one to use, but you'll have an estate, but it's formed out of different blocks. So the cost is coded to the block where it's a block cost. But if we should have an estate gardening program, for instance, that's attributable to the estate. And the cost is spread out by that across the estate or estate costs, or only to the block if it's internal cleaning, for instance.
There should be a map attached to the lease, which will give every leaseholder it will set a boundary around that map. Anything within that boundary will be.
In the wording of the lease as well, it states what is the building and what is the estate.
And can you give me an assurance that within the council's estate, we wouldn't have an apparent horror story like the gentleman from Shaftesbury Place from Notting Hill Genesis, where they appear to have been charged insurance for commercial premises that happen to be within the area? Do we give an assurance? We don't have any examples of that.
Well,
I don't.
we know. We have commercial buildings adjacent to ours. We manage a number of commercial buildings, but there is a percentage deduction for the work. So the size of the commercial building, if it's below a block, would mean that there'll be a credit, if you like, to the overall service charge because it's commercial tenant.
Right. Do I think? Do you want to come in on that point, Timothy?
No, different point. No, you go on to your next question.
Yeah. The next one I wanted was this was going back to the Tadham Road example, where we had some periodic large maintenance. In my block, we used to paying a sinking fund, which builds up every year. So when we get in 2021, we had a building which contains 8 flats. It's a large house with 8 flats. I think it was 120,000 to refurbish the whole outside of the building. But there was a sinking fund that built up for a number of years. So the actual bill that was attributed in year was rather much more modest to each individual flats. Is that to what extent? I have asked you this before, and I'll ask you again on to what extent have you thought about this?
So there has to be a wish for that really, to happen. So where we've been in issues before, my answer's been where, so for instance, we're on site on parts of Swinbrook, the first works that carried on there 30 years. If we were charging a sinking fund works that were never happening at the right time, you get the converse then as well, hang on, I'm paying you this way, you're taking my money and you're not doing that work. So we need some assurity about what we're going to do going forward. But of course, paying us money in advance of the work is quite a stress on behalf of the leaseholders, given no respect our history and where we are on this journey. So we can bring the pros and cons. We can bring up. Maybe we've done that in the past, but I don't think there's any huge appetite for leaseholders. I think the lease gives us the ability to do that.
The lease refers to reserve funds, I think. So, but we don't have them at the moment, and it's very difficult to implement them now with all the buildings already there. The reason why a sinking fund works is because you have it from the property from a new build position. So you build up a fund. The first work is needed in say 10 years' time. Therefore, the fund is growing quite a lot. We have old properties which needs maintenance more regularly. So you'll be paying into the sinking fund, and when the major works happen, you'll have to pay again because there won't be enough funds in the sinking fund. So it is a difficult thing to implement on all the buildings that's been in existence for a long time.
Sure, I
With
agree
the
with
lab,
that.
major
Given
work.
my building's 1870, but go, so if you wanted to
Yeah.
add something.
I'm glad you asked that question, Councillor Howard. It was one of the first questions I asked when I took on my role, because I was quite shocked by some of the bills that leaseholders have to face for the major works. And it is a huge amount of money, but because we have no sinking fund. But I wonder if it's might be something we could just bring a paper and then ask the homeowners panel if that is something
Yeah.
that might be.
We have done it in the past, councillor, Councillor McPain, and it wasn't that. Because what we did instead is we extended the repayment period, so you can get up to 20 years repayment, which was a better deal. For most of this, but we're more than happy to look at it because things change and things evolve. And actually, at the moment, we're in the middle of carrying out those capital works, so there's an awful lot of bills, and so that may change people's views.
I'm specifically saying that a sinking fund sits in the individual buildings bank accounts. I wouldn't be remotely suggesting that it goes into the council's coffers and it drops down against everything else. My final question was to ask you whether you attribute the service charges by size of the property. So my flat, I think, pays 12. I think it's 12% of the service charge because it's roughly 12% of the floor area of my building. Is that what you do with the council flats? Because clearly we've got council leasehold flats, all sorts of different sizes, from studios to 3-4 bedrooms.
We use the number of bedrooms, so it's allocated, the service charge are allocated, it's worked out according to the number of bedrooms. So yes, it's roughly down on size. And so every bedroom, every habitable room gets a point, for 1 point assigned to it. So the lounge and the bedrooms will get 1 point, every kitchen and bathroom half a point. So it's a point system that is based on the number of bedrooms. So the more bedrooms you have, the bigger percentage of the cost will be apportioned to that flat.
And that calculation is done across the whole building, and then your individual flat takes the percentage according to the number of bedrooms. So it's quite a correct calculation then, but it's better than the different sizes.
Yes, but that's, I think most of the local authorities would use a similar type of calculation based on bedrooms. We don't have all the maps and the drawings to know what the floor area is of every flat. On the new builds, we have, and we do apportion it based on the floor space of every flat. But on the older properties, we don't have that information. The best we have is the number of bedrooms.
I'll go this way, if that's all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very interesting report. This is a subject I have a deep fascination on. Like Councillor Hammond, I've been involved in block management for over 20 years, and I work for a charity that represents 30 mansion blocks in the area, some owned by HB, some privately owned, some share freehold. And it is a common problem across the board. It's not just subject to any. And there are some blocks that are suffering more than others because their insurance may be going up for flood reasons, for other risks. Their staffing costs are going up because of the changes in staffing and pensions and things like that. Plus in the major works because of new legislation, which is coming as a shock to some people, as every 3 years you have a fire audit and it comes up with you've got to have your front doors replaced or your common area doors or fire escapes in some cases that haven't been maintained properly in the past. So these costs are across the board. So I kind of get that. I've got 3 questions really. One is about the debt support. We talked about this before. I'm wondering how effective is it going to be supporting people that have these problems? Are you going to have enough money in the budget for that? And if you could just give us an update on that, because a lot of people might not be aware that as a borough we support people that are struggling.
Do you want to
Yes,
talk about the service charge collectors because it's different for leaseholders and
Sure. No, of course,
yes. For leaseholders, we have a very generous payment options like that explained with major works. And there are options that are interest free. They go and the payment options range up to 20 years. That depends on the value of the invoice that people receive. They can contact our team, and we the team is very adept at making payment arrangements that people can stick to. And we've been very successful in that. We've collected quite a lot of money already and have it secured on payment plans where necessary. So vulnerable leaseholders would have the option to secure a charge on the property, which means that the costs will be payable when the property transfer. So yes, on annual service charges, usually we would require people to pay that off within the year, so within 12-month payment plans. And the reason for that is simply because it's a recurring charge. So next year you'll get it again, and if we agree a longer payment term, it may be some hardship the next year. But we have some cases where we've done that. If the service charge has gone up a lot, then we would agree longer payment terms. And the arrears have gone up last year slightly, well, mainly because we've changed the systems, IT systems, and that had an impact. But we started off the year with a very good collection rate again, so we are confident that we will catch up again in this year. I don't know if that is answering the question, because your question is, do we have the money in the budget for it? And
It's the support for those people that are struggling. I'll just give you a local estate where it's actually major works. And some people are having to take extensions on their mortgage if they're a leaseholder to pay for that. And we're talking in the tens of thousands, not just small amounts here. But it's capital works that probably originally weren't expected because the block was originally earmarked for demolishing and rebuilding, whereas they're now doing repairs.
We're trying to avoid that. We're trying to have extended payment terms so that people can pay it off over time with us, and mostly that's interest free, or we'll have the last 10 years is interest generating, but it's a low interest rate. So we're trying to help and protect leaseholders as much as possible. But obviously it's their choice. If they want to extend a mortgage, then that would be up to them to make that decision.
And can I also, second question is about consultation with residents groups. So when you come to an estate, and we've heard some really good examples of where things are not properly understood, and I understand you'll probably send out service charge with details of it. Is there I mean, it's great if there's a resident association in a block, and I'm a big fan of resident association engagement with them, because at least it gets the word round to everybody. But often, especially in big estates, that doesn't happen. So do you have regular meetings with residents groups, or how does it work? I mean, have the majority of the estates got residents groups or compacts that you can consult with? Because it must be really frustrating to get this bill that's gone up and you don't understand why the individual bits. But if you've already consulted with the residents group, it's kind of much easier if they have a coffee morning one morning to explain it or something like that.
Yeah, our larger estates that have our resident groups. Obviously, usually for leaseholders, they happen more often when there's major works on an estate plan, then you'll have more RAs being set up. But we do engage with them via the homeowner panel. We meet quarterly. We usually discuss any of the charges that will go up significantly, like insurance. We've had that on the agenda the last 3 meetings. We've discussed caretaking before that. We've had grounds maintenance before. So that's usually the sounding board that's employed. We also have regular meetings on the estates, not normally with my team, but with the service delivery teams. We'll have that communication. I think that's what you would want to say.
Sorry, so about a bit over half of our estates have recognised groups that we can get to, but they represent more than half the properties managed. Where there are major works and there are considerable amount of leaseholders, you have had some leasehold meetings, which
for major works, definitely
specific to just leaseholders, because they're often there'll be meetings with all residents, but there are some specifics that the home ownership team will also deal with and go through. But I think trying to explain to people how the major works process and the threat of the very large bills, because we don't bill until the work is completed, final account is settled. That could be some time, especially if you've got concerns over the quality, or there might be issues, so we don't always just settle on final account, sometimes we dispute it. So that can take a while. So it could be many years. The bills are set there.
And my third question was really about insurance. I'm very grateful to Councillor today for taking me to one of the public meetings that you had, which kind of explained it, that there was an officer there. And I was quite surprised, like many of the residents were, that it was the only one option. And one of the questions that I thought was interesting, if you've got an estate with 3 tower blocks and you could work out whether block A, block B, block C is more risky, it might be that they've had more incidences of people putting televisions over the balcony, or it might be a particular problem block that's not been refurbished before, and they have more claims against them, leaks and things like that. Is that reflected that the estate doesn't share the cost? It's block by block. That you just said earlier, I think.
Not for insurance. it
Yeah,
isn't, no.
not,
No,
no,
it's shared with the estate.
It's shared across the borough.
yeah,
So that's the,
yeah. But
Great.
it is,
so it's the overall claims experience of policy.
So if there's a particular block that has a problem, it could be a design problem, it could be that it hasn't had its leaks fixed, something like that, then that's going to be shared across the portfolio.
the rebuild value for that block will be different. So rebuild values are set for every block. And, but the overall policy gets, will have an overall increase, but then that amount, the amount of money that it costs is then spread according to the rebuild values. So that block will have a higher, the premiums will be higher for the individual leaseholders in that specific, for that specific block. But the overall premium is agreed based on the combined risk that's being insured.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rossi, sorry to keep you waiting.
No, that's fine. So just to say that I have been a leaseholder for 2 years, and I have great sympathy with what people have said tonight, private leases, but my service charge has gone up exponentially for reasons I really can't fathom. So I would say at least our council tenants can come here and hold the council to account, and they should do that. I think they should. Whereas maybe people who are private leaseholders have not, you know, will have to actually go to law or something in order to sort their problems out. But anyway, my question is surrounding this is paragraph 5.39, that the landlord and tenant act section 22 allows leaseholders to have a look at and to see the invoices. It says within 6 months. So could you clarify, is that, I mean, I would have thought it would be preferable if I were a leaseholder on one of our estates, that you have the invoice, and before you actually pay it, you know, you've got the demand, and then you have all the invoices first, not 6 months later. And then the other thing, just briefly, is David was saying he wasn't getting all of the invoices, or they weren't coming on at the same time. I think that's really poor. I think that if people ask for invoices, they should get them, you know, as an all in one go and without too much difficulty.
Thank you, Councillor Rossi. I'll leave Yana to do this. The specific case of Lancaster West, I was there in one of the leaseholder meetings going to the request for scars. And it is a huge number of invoices, so I assume that is probably part of the concern. But one of the things I think we might really need to be mindful of, and I just came up earlier, and I know Doug and I speak about this a lot, is making sure we do get value for money. And I think that's got a plan to be kind of looking at all that. I know everything's always, you know, public money, everything's always out for proper tender processes, because obviously where we're charging leaseholders, we're also as landlords paying the bill for part of our tenants. So for us, we don't want to be paying more than we have to. That's ridiculous too. But
I think the full transparency, yes, we do need, obviously, value for money is very important, but also having, you know, the invoices to back up expenditure. I think that's really important, so people can see.
Oh, sorry, I was just putting my head up. Just wait. That's right. I didn't mean to interrupt. So it's we have to prove the costs being incurred. That's part of the landlord and tenant act. So we must have an invoice to or proof that we've incurred cost, else we can't be charging.
yeah, we have to have the evidence, and like we've explained in the report, we have to prove that we've incurred the cost, and we have several systems, and it's not always that easy to pull off all the invoices. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it is true. So, but providing the invoices is one thing, but David, like you said, they now have lots of questions about that, and it's now that process of us going back to the service providers saying, can you give us evidence of this? What is about the quality of that? So it's not necessarily only about the invoices, it's about questions around those invoices. So we need all the different teams to get back to us with responses so that we can put it all in one response and send it out again. So, but yes, obviously the whole process should be quicker, and that's what we're working on. We've had a lot of staff absences over this time, so that didn't help, but we are very close to sending the response.
So sorting out these systems, will that help?
It will definitely assist. Yes, it will make a difference.
To the point I was making earlier about the financial ledger, if you like, speaking to our repairs system is crucial for us to make that. So you would like to think in 2024 that would all, but they're actually separate systems. That's what we've got currently. But
And they don't have reference numbers that match. So it is sometimes trying to find a needle in a haystack.
But as we know, IBC, which is our financial system at the moment, is going next spring. We have one more year on this.
Yes. The other point you made is about the 6 months.
Yes.
So how the legislation works is you have 6 months after, as a leaseholder, you have 6 months after we issue the final bill. That's usually September, October-ish time. And then you have 6 months to request the invoices. So that's how the legislation is set up, and I think it's because of the potential cost implications involved. So the landlord is allowed to charge reasonable costs. We don't charge anything for provision of the invoices, but it is on some estates, it's a huge amount of invoices. We've done it on the large estates, and if you print it out, you're talking about leverage files that you're preparing to send out. So sending that out to all these sellers will probably not be helpful because they feel like drowning in paper and not understanding why we're sending all of this out. But people who request it, we have to provide it to them, and we happily do so. So, but there's a period of 6 months cut off, which again, I think it is just to close down various, but that's set by legislation. We didn't come up with it. So in that 6 months, we provide invoices when you please.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chair. My question is just in relation to actually one of the points that was raised by Thomas Becker about Notting Hill Genesis and the incorrect fire assessment that led to the service charge going up 3 times. In cases like that where you have a registered provider saying one thing and residents saying another, and the service charges increase significantly because of a process that they're maintaining is still sound. Who decides whether that registered provider is right or wrong? And when they are in the wrong, are there penalties that we can apply to them so that they're incentivized to get things right?
we don't actually have any jurisdiction in terms of it's over a registered provider, but there is, of course, a first state tribunal, which would be very interested in those sorts of issues. And there is also a group of Lease who are a support, who would advise leaseholders and may well help in terms of
lease advice. Yeah, they call. So lease advice provide free advice to leaseholders. It's a government initiative, so very good place to ask for information or sometimes.
Because every year we have our leaseholder event where these tend to come.
Yeah.
And because we want people to be able to challenge us. So they're very, they can help leaseholders. So in this case, if there really isn't a meeting of minds, if you like, then that should be considered if it doesn't feel that it's fair or just.
And just in terms of following up on that, it sounds from your answer that with registered providers we have far less control in terms of when service charges are going up significantly due to something that the registered provider is maintaining is correct. Do we have an impression of which registered providers, we heard one mentioned, but which are worse and what we can do about it, or is that not data that we have?
If I did, councillor, I would not be sharing this in
Okay.
the public arena, but we hear anecdotally, and that's about it really. We're not really close enough to it. And of course, each registered provider has its own board and its own governance structure, which might be a way in. So.
And Councillor set up the registered provider, because I think with everything, the more dialogue, the better. I mean, obviously, from different parts of the housing team, we have relationships with registered providers if we are putting residents in them. But in terms of regulating them, we don't have any power. But again, our environmental services do from a different part of the council, different things. So there's many different ways to communicate and to bring some pressure to bear. So that might be a kind of informal route. Perhaps we can.
Chair, if I may just add a footnote, I've got in front of me the leasehold advisory service as it's been recorded and as there are members of the public. If you wanted to make a note, their website is www.lease-advice.org and their general email is info@lease-advice.org. And it's a free service.
Did you have any other questions, Councillor Day?
No, thank you, Chair.
I have just a couple really. First of all, I wanted to thank you for the paper. It's actually, I think, very helpful in terms of considering this issue for us to have such a clear understanding of what the systems are, how they're working, and also the section on tenants, as well as for leasehold service charges, because there are concerns around those as well. My main concern is to have an understanding of how our errors are occurring, how are they being rectified, and also how can we increase the transparency and the accuracy around this. So I was wondering whether we might, as a committee, want to make a recommendation towards there being some sort of action plan around increasing the transparency and accuracy. It sounds like some of that may resolve itself as the systems change, but I think given the scale of it and the impact on the residents, and bearing in mind, if I may, in terms of major works, for residents in my ward, it's not a case of tens of thousands of pounds. We're talking six-figure sums. Now, if you are in your 70s, say, or on a limited income, there's no way that's realistic, and you're left with a choice either to sell and accept a reduction in your property value, or to take out a mortgage that you probably won't be able to get, or you're just left in a very, very difficult position. And even with generous support offers from the council around that, it doesn't necessarily mitigate for everyone. So I wonder what the committee think about the suggestion to recommend that there be an action plan around this.
I would phrase it, is it simply an action plan, or do we, what's the action plan for to increase the transparency and accuracy?
So
do we have to be able to measure this? So it has to be measured now as being less transparent and less accurate than we would like, and we have to have a measurement afterwards.
So for instance, one way to measure might be in terms of the satisfaction of the leaseholders. And I think we can say at this point that we might have relatively low-ish satisfaction, given how much this is being raised.
Chat, just wondering, we do have a working group, so there was a working group previously and another one's coming up. I don't think that's something to work with them through this.
Yeah, the first working group happened last week, and they'll be meeting quarterly. I don't know what was agreed at the meeting. I should have found out before tonight, but I think they're meeting quarterly And they've
Who's in the
terms of
working
reference.
Residents.
I believe.
Leaseholders.
Except I didn't know the meeting was.
Yeah, there's, there's a few leaseholders attending. There's, I think, a group of 10 who's on the current plan, and they've agreed amongst, one of the terms of reference is that if somebody doesn't attend twice in a row without any good reason, they'll be replaced by the next leaseholder. So, and they're going to focus on repairs first, and then move their way through all the heads of charges or all the items that we're charging on service charges.
I mean, accuracy and transparency are really important objectives, of course, and the question is whether we can say something that's useful that sort of pushes you in that direction without creating a bureaucratic monster. But, and that's what, and actually something that's got to be helpful to residents.
Can I ask another question? Leaseholders have the right to see the invoices. Do tenants have that right? Or legally? And if they don't, if they ask for it, would you be able to give them the invoices?
And access under freedom of information.
Yes.
So probably.
But it will be a much more different type of system because some of the charges would be pulled. So it will be, they could access the invoices, but it's not the same type of calculation that you would have on the leasehold side.
Okay.
Could I just add that
Yes.
one of the people on our estate has a freedom of information requesting for invoices, and that's been over a year, and there's been no response. So any response back on that. So I'm not sure. The difference seems to be that you don't get any.
I'm not aware of
So perhaps that's something.
It would be useful, yeah, and it's certainly good for all residents on an estate to be able to see what they're being billed for.
I think so. Yeah, I would think so too. So perhaps maybe we'll formulate a recommendation if we can outside the meeting.
It might be a good idea to do. I mean, is that the direction of travel we're happy with?
Yeah, I think because people should be able to see what they're paying. I think that's just a good principle.
The difficulty is, Councillor Anderson, is how do you measure it without being too bureaucratic and time consuming to have a system that you measure
As far as
whether
I'm
it's
aware,
successful?
as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been a leaseholder survey for a while.
No, yeah.
Oh, really?
I haven't received anything. In fact, I found out this meeting just Friday nights. So I just want to actually point that not all leaseholders that contract actually say there's actually anything happening. Especially if you previously complained about the level of service, you're not told anything. So I would like to actually have that pointed out.
The Housing Scrutiny Committee, though, is a regular event in the diary. Maybe there was confusion because one was moved.
This one's the one that's moved to the election. So the objective is to improve the accuracy and transparency for everybody, and for us to recommend that the executive does something along those lines. But equally, we don't want to be so focused on it that you lose sight of actually doing the job.
Yeah. I think no matter what, it'd be very helpful to bring something back to the committee. Once we know more about the computer changes.
There's always, I mean, the major issue I think will come up with these others who move forward this predominantly is about annual service charges. But major works are likely to be the issue because, as you know, we're investing a substantial amount of money into our estate, and these will be in many cases the first bills that we raise for thing.
The challenge is probably further removed between them to work on, but having heard the discussion, to work on some wording for us to look at in the next item.
And Chair, finally, sorry, can I just also please to all residents here and anyone online, but just to remind everyone that the homeowner panel is open to all our leaseholders, and that is all the dates should be on the website, but if not, we will.
They will, but if anybody wants an invite, we constantly ask leaseholders just to email us. They put them on the invite list and they can get an invite.
Maybe that's something we can think about, maybe it's more proactive about making sure all leaseholders know about that.
So who should email us Sorry, who should leaseholders email
If
to
they,
in order to know about the homeowner panel?
if they email, our team inbox, it's HM, dash, homeownership at rbkc.gov.uk. They simply have to say, can you add them to the invite list, and we add them.
Let's see if we can, we'll try and get
Thank
more
you.
back to that.
Thank
actually. And again, the annual homeowner event in autumn as well.
We do tally solace with all the invoices, so it's a standard paragraph that's included in the cover letter to say how to join the homeowner family. And it's in the newsletter, the Housing Matters newsletter that's just gone. We've also had an article there about it.
And the other thing I wanted to ask about was putting errors right, and how easy it is for leaseholders to challenge when they think there may be an error.
If leaseholders email our team inbox, I don't think it's difficult because we do get a lot of emails, and we track those emails as soon as we discover that we've been wrong, and that is corrected. So if one leaseholder in a block would say, you've charged me for grounds maintenance that I didn't get, and if we find that that is true, then we credit the entire block. So all the leaseholders in that block will get a credit. So they'll receive a letter from us with an apology. They'll then get the credit on the account, and it's usually quite a straightforward process. The investigation could take a while because there could be a lot of backwards and forwards with us, the service provider, and potentially with the leaseholder. But we don't. If we're wrong, we're wrong. There's no point in trying to argue.
We wish to avoid going to a first tier tribunal like anywhere else. So we do reflect on that. But there are times we don't agree.
Yeah.
And there are times where it's quite obvious we've made a mistake and we need to correct it.
Thank you, thank you. And I just wonder if perhaps there's something that we could suggest as a committee as well around the engagement with leaseholders. I think it's what you were alluding to, wasn't it? So
I think that's part of the kind of transparency, not just transparency on the bills, but the transparency about communications and hearing from residents and hearing from everyone. So let's get that away and actually it's something.
So thank you. And I just want to also add to remind anyone that wasn't able to come to the meeting today, if you're a leaseholder, and you'd like to, you've got something to say about the subject, again, do please feel free to email speak to me at rbkc.gov.uk. Thank you very much. Back to communities. Thank you. Thank you. So the next agenda item is item A4, and that's the community's performance information.
Sorry, what number?
A4.
Page 17, I think. 17.
Yeah, page 17, that's right, thank you. That's welcome, Morgan. Welcome, Councillor Edinburgh. Would you like to say a few words about paper, draw our attention to anything in particular?
Well, I think I'm just going to say I hope you've all read the paper, and really to thank Moira and her team for all of the consultation and engagement they've been carrying out. Moira, maybe you'd like to highlight a few bits.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Edinburgh. So this is the third performance report. Again, we have included additional information which was requested at the last meeting. So the heat maps that have been included on pages 36 and 37. These maps do come with some caveats attached in that the map on page 36, which was asked for, which was a response across the borough in terms of all consultations. Just being mindful that some consultations are actually geographic based. So for example, the Earls Court PSPO, that had a large number of responses, but that was specific to Earls Court, so that would boost their numbers. And we have the same, for example, in Nottingdale and Colville, where we had the consultation on the Brentwood Futurist response. And page 37 is more reflective of the response that is more comparable. But having said that, in some cases where we do have borough-wide consultation, it's still of more interest to particular areas. So, for example, cycle lanes, where there are cycle lanes, you're more likely to get a response. But it does provide some good information about where we can see good engagement in consultation. And we are considering, based on the heat map, how we can actually work with services, but also with those colleagues who work on the ground in those particular neighbourhoods to maybe do some work to boost the number of people in those low response areas that can actually take part. So maybe there's a way that we can have a localized campaign to ensure that we get more responses in particular parts of the borough. So I'm just going to leave it there and open up for any questions or any comments from anyone, or if there any additional information you would like to see us bring the next time we report on our performance.
Thank you. Councillor Hammond.
Thanks very much, Sarah and Moira, for that. I will start with the heat maps and just and thank you for producing them. The other caveat, of course, is the relative population is the difference in the ward. So you've got the very smallest ward, Pembridge, right next to the biggest, Colville, and that. Crudely, there's 2 and 3 member wards, but they do vary a bit between them. So that's something you might want to take into account. And if you were to do a recalculate by per head of population as a percentage, maybe that would give you a slightly more finer set of data just to look at. And hugely different, but it might make Pembridge look a bit better and Dalgarno look a bit better. In terms of the amount of responses. The actual question I've got, and the area I want to explore is the citizens panel, and I didn't write down what page that was on, but it was the participation level in the citizens panel. I thought that was generally quite low, running about 20%. All the different surveys, and I did the calculations and should have written down which page it was. I can't find it now.
It's on page 24. And it has gone. It increased from the last report, where I think it was about we had quite low numbers who responded in terms of agreeing or tending to agree with regards to being able to influence decisions affecting their local area. That has increased quite considerably from the last quarter.
Yeah, it has. That wasn't really the question. It was on the table on the right hand side of the page where the responses we've got in April 23, 334, in August 314, and in March this year 404, which is of course an increase, but that's out of 2,000 members.
Yeah.
So we're talking at best a 20% response rate for who have signed up, and that's strikes me as being quite low.
So I think there's an issue around the topics. We did one before about transport. There was not in response to that. I think there's a difference between the in-person. We do one citizens panel a year in person, and then the rest are online. We have refreshed the citizens panel, so I think these numbers will improve. But again, it's very much topic related as to what responses we get.
What are there any incentives for people to be involved in that? Apart from generally contributing to the life of the borough?
There are some incentives for people on the citizens panel. I can find out what exactly those are and report back to you. But there are definitely some incentives. And as Councillor Addenbrooke says, it does depend on the topic. But generally, of the 2,000, we don't normally get above, let's say, 25-30% responses. And so we're refreshing every year to try and get more people that are interested. There are some people that join the panel and don't respond to any surveys, and there are some who respond to every survey. So we tend to have a core of the panel that does respond to all the surveys, but we are trying to get those numbers up. And as you can see that it did go up over the last quarter, but we're trying to make sure that we get even higher response rate from the panel going forward.
So you've got records of what the core people
Yes.
who respond to everyone, and that,
Yeah.
what proportion is that roughly?
That is roughly about 25%.
You're only getting 20% overall.
25%, yes.
Returning. So in terms of the overall 2,000, it's what?
Yeah, of the overall 2,000, if you look at, so not responding to every single survey, but have responded to at least one or two in the year. So it tends to be about 25-30%. But if you're looking at who responds to every survey, it would be a lower figure. Yeah.
Right, thanks.
By the way, that figure is not bad. You're tending to, you're suggesting that 25% is a low figure. It's not.
May I suggest
We'd
that,
like to do something though.
Yeah.
may I suggest that first and speak through the chair?
Sorry.
But thank you for the contribution. And yes, it may be that this is, you need 2,000 people to get this sort of rate, but like you say, we want it to be as high as possible. Thank you. Councillor Rossi.
Yeah, can I say something about the presentation? I think you have to be a bit more careful with the percentages because they're a bit all over the place. Particularly misleading, it can be misleading in that the kind of half of the ward on the first page here, the top bit of the ward there, you've got 74% from North Kensington, 25% did not share the postcode, 21% from outside the borough, and 5% from the rest of RBKC. The percentages meant to add up to 100. So when you're putting them on the same thing, you've got to be very, very careful because I think you might confuse people. And it worse, I mean, I know it's not intentional, but it could be misleading. And the other thing I'm going to say is about the demographic again. We always have the category of over 60. We never subdivide that. And I think, you know, as you get older, you begin to realise that is really a bit ridiculous. You've got an under 16, but everyone over 6. I mean, I know there were less respondents here, but everyone over 60 is in the same bracket. And of course, there is a big difference between a 65-year-old and a 95-year-old. But I mean, we tend to always do that as a borough in everything we do. We don't subdivide the kind of, as you get older, you're just an old person and that's it. So yeah.
We can subdivide that down further for the next report. We can subdivide that.
Yeah, that would be good. But yeah, it's a lot of very interesting information here. So I did enjoy reading it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for this paper. My question just relates to the number of responses to all the various consultations. So slides where you have the consultations for Q3, Q4, etc. Of course, there's a big difference in number of responses between some of these. So, for instance, budget fees and charges, fire responses, and right underneath the low income support payment over 1,000. My question is the same sort of strategic comms and outreach done for every type of consultation, or different resources and different strategies put in place depending on what the consultation is? And then just a tangential question linked to that. Who decides what these consultations are called? Because I think if you have a consultation that has a phrase like making the borough safer, you know, when people read that, they think, oh yeah, that's really important. I'd like to respond to that. But if you say budget fees and charges, it sounds extremely dry, and people might not realise that it's actually really important fees and charges that they're having to pay every single day. So those are my two questions.
Thank you. So in terms of the resources for consultation, we use the same comms resource in terms of promoting the consultations, but also depending on which consultation it is, depending on the service area, they might use additional comms, working with their user groups and different avenues and channels that they have for specific service areas. In terms of who decides what the consultation is called, generally it is through the service area, but we do try and give advice within the consultation and participation service to try and make it more attractive to residents. So we do support service areas, but again, they also work with our comms colleagues as well to make sure that it's promoted and it's seen as a particular area that we might want to respond to. But we try to be very clear about what the consultation is, rather than making it a little bit vague with the titling, just to make it more attractive.
And I think making the borough safer is actually an annual consultation, so that we can benchmark. So I think we do tend to get coming back to that one.
Thank you.
Councillor Law.
Yes, 2 points and 1 question. This weekend I was out on the doorstep in Old Court, and I can't tell you how many people are very happy about the way in which the consultation was done and how it was implemented. I mean, it was just every doorstep, everybody knew about it, and that's rare. And that was it was very welcome. So the whole way in which we've conducted the whole thing, as well as the implementation and working together with partners, and literally the meeting I came from straight to here was the liaison meeting. And one of the things that came out of that, and which is in this paper here, is not all boroughs are lucky as us to say that we give and donate and support good causes which affect people in the borough. And I'm just looking at some of them here, and I know that there's too many to go on to, but there are some fantastic projects and funding that we give that if you live in somewhere like Croydon or South London, you don't get that opportunity. So that was the 2 points I wanted to make. Followed by one of the points from my colleague who isn't here tonight was about consultation, and the example I'll use is Cooney News, where a lot of consultation was done, a very low response. But what I think was missing there were the resident associations, there's a lot of them in that area, contacted, because it's such a tiny little parklet, Cooney News, if you're not familiar with it, and there was very little interest in it, probably because it went out to residents, not residents groups, which may have a collective voice. I just wanted to, does that happen as well as?
We do have the mailing list of residents associations, and we do send out to residents associations in a particular area. We are updating the database because we are aware that some of the information is out of date, but that's definitely part of our targeting and promoting those resident groups as well.
That was going to be my follow-up question to that, because I've got that information, and I've noticed that there's a couple of people that have actually died on it.
Yeah.
So it does definitely need updating. And there's one block in particular in Colville where the block has actually been enfranchised, and the person that's the contact for the residents group is in the enfranchised part, not the RBKC part. So yes, it definitely does. Do you have a time period for when you'll complete that?
Well, I think we ought to go back out to all the councillors and ask them to look at the residents' associations in their wards and
Good idea.
update them.
Yeah, 100%.
So we'll send that out.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have some comments or questions from Councillor Wade also, who she made the point, it's concerning that such low response levels are being recorded for consultation to justify decision making. And I would like to ask what the steps are for conducting consultation. Maybe this is something in detail that she could have a written answer.
Maybe she'd like to highlight which particular consultations.
Yeah, because
it's one of rules.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah. Is information provided to councillors about consultations that impact their wards? The PSPO was promoted by Felicity Buckingham ward councillors.
No, that's incorrect. In fact, the ward councillors were kept advised of the whole thing. But because we had the elections, the council could not put out any additional comms once it was actually being implemented. But prior to that, they were definitely kept updated. And they actually had a briefing before. Okay, thank you for that. And then 3.5
Is it 3.5? Yes, 3.5 economic development. I would like to see a report back as to business engagement and outcomes. And maybe that's something that could usefully be included going forward. Is it not?
It's not, but if it's about consultation, are you
Yeah.
specifically asking about consultation with
Yes.
businesses?
Yeah. I think maybe it's going on.
It is going on,
Yeah.
the awakenings, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it is a specific about
Yeah.
consultation, then we could do it. If it's about the economy, that do a slate and do it.
Yes.
So maybe I will check with Linda if she wants to answer that. And then
Actually, just sorry, Chair, going back to the PSPO.
Yes.
In fact, Linda Wade did put out an email to their party announcing the PSPO before we had actually announced it as the council.
Okay.
So she knew well ahead of
Right.
anything going out from.
Okay. It may be that the election period, of course.
Well, no, this was way before, but we
Yes,
not going to announce it until the Monday, and she announced it on Friday.
Of course. And I just wanted to ask a couple of things. First of all, thank you very much for this very useful information. I was wondering about, in terms of performance, the VSSF and CLLL. Could these be somehow included in performance measures?
They could, yes, they're normally reported separately,
Yeah.
but we can, because this is more just your figures and stats, there's not a lot of narrative that goes with
Yeah.
it. Whereas CLLL and
It's
VSSF have
more narrative.
more narrative. We can incorporate the figures
Yeah.
in here if you wish.
Yeah, I'm
for the next
wondering
one.
about, in terms of specifically performance,
Okay.
what might be a useful performance measure around that? Not so much in terms of the organisation supported, but in terms of the programme itself.
I wonder if it might be.
Because it's funding that's attributable to each of the 18 wards, and it's dependent on people coming forward to bid. And the bids being compliant and supportive. So there's a lot of variables there that aren't really in the council executives.
There are.
I think there's almost too much information to go into
Yes.
this report. It's probably better to keep it separate.
So, given that we've just had, for instance, with CLLO, we've just had a review. Might it be useful for us to understand how those changes are working? Just to pick an example.
I think we could do that, but I think it's probably a little bit early because it was very much a light touch review. And I think it just clarified some of the parameters.
It was a light touch review, but we were all circulated with some changes.
Yeah.
And some of those changes may or may not be having impact.
Agreed, but I think that's only literally just come in last month. So I think maybe after a couple of months, we could just be doing.
But so, for instance, if resident or a group applies to CLLL and perhaps they don't get a response until their event, 2 days before their event, how is that process working? And I think that is proper for this committee. So that's what I mean.
How efficient is the process working? So the turnaround times
That kind of thing, yes.
bid to.
Because that shouldn't be happening. I mean, that should.
So
Hopefully, it mostly isn't, but we don't know at this point, and that might be something worth including.
So because I'm thinking another couple of months, the next meeting possibly, next Richley meeting or the meeting after, we can bring something.
We could just add it to the performance.
Next.
The next quarter, then 3 months time for the next. Okay.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. Excellent. That's all I had, I think. So thank you very much. And we will move to the next item on the agenda. Oh. Before you go, sorry, I've been reminded to ask, would any member of the public like to ask a question on this paper? Since you're here. Yes.
Yes, I should be careful, particularly this year, that we're suffering from consultation exhaustion. And I've actually been involved where I've had 0% response, 100% response. The 100% response was because we included lots of jokes and thought-provoking things in the proposal, and everyone turned up, all 46 eminent scientists turned up because they wanted an explanation. The zero response was simply that people were just exhausted about being consulted, apart from the fact that our working group contained 80% of the people who would have responded. But consequently, we didn't get. So you have to treat this as a sort of movable piece. But particularly this year, you want to stop consulting. We've been over consulted by the political parties, you name it. And you need to ration consultation if you want to get over this 25%. It's absolutely essential. But you can't expect to get big numbers. Anything 25-30% is terrific. It's representative. And most people don't quite understand that. I appreciate that, but it is representative. But if you get anything over there, then someone's cheating. Someone's fiddling the figures.
I think the point I was making earlier, yeah, I think it'd be amazing. I mean, 25% for like a party survey, that would be unbelievably good. I think where we've got a selected panel here of 2,000 people who are a pool of people of the borough themselves, and they know they're in that pool. That's why I was commenting on the response rates. It wasn't because that's the borough's population. I wouldn't expect anything like that out of the borough's population.
I might just add that maybe perhaps linking the consultation to actually what happens, because I think a lot of people feel that they're answering questions and they go to the box somewhere and that's it. So I think maybe feeling that and feeding back to people what their consultation has resulted in and what changes it's brought might give a better formal consultation because people will feel identified.
So actually in the paper, there's a section which is called "You Said We Did."
Yeah.
And that will give you.
Yeah, I think that's the bit that needs.
And I totally understand what you say about consultation fatigue. We hear it a lot, but we have made a commitment that we will consult. So.
Could I also say that we are looking at where we can join consultations up so that you're not in, having consultation after consultation where there are common themes. They're thinking about, well, do we have to have 2 or 3 pieces of consultation? Can we just have one exercise that includes all the questions? So we are looking at different ways that we can reduce the amount of consultation while still being able to speak with residents and get their views.
Can I just also add that the e-newsletters that you send out are really useful. They're nice and simple. They're little bites. If you want to hear more, you can click on the play the video and you get one of the councillors talking about a park that's been done. I think they're really useful, and you can pick and choose bits, and they come out so regularly, and they must take a lot of time to produce. So,
now, how can people sign up for the e-newsletter? Do we know?
It's not our community's one, it's just a council one.
There's a council one. Generally sign up by going online.
I think there's a link on the website.
There's a link on the website.
and you can even pick by subject as well.
Excellent. Can I just add, just before we round this off, just in terms of representativeness, it's not just about group numbers, it is how you sample. That's all I need to say.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So we move now to paper A6.
Yeah.
Housing and social investment performance. This report and its appendices are provided. This report and its appendices are provided to allow the committee to consider the housing needs, housing management, and the social investment and property performance updates up to the end of March 2024.
So yes, you need to be
Welcome back. Welcome. Would the lead member like to introduce the book? The committee,
I think it's,
can we launch?
I think probably not as much, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I think there's a lot of useful graphs and flow charts there. So happy to take any questions. Got full team here. Excellent.
There was just one thing I was going to add, which is that I think looking again at the paper, the one thing that I didn't include that I probably should have done is that as well as this report which we've agreed to bring annually to this committee, there is also quarterly published on the council website as part of the new reporting on the council plan and performance information about that runs across the whole council, which of course includes some of these metrics. This is a deeper but less frequent dive. So we do this once a year across a larger range of measures. But what you've got is some of these measures are reported quarterly as part of the council-wide suite of measures. So, I'm very happy to send a reminder link to the team for that to include in the minutes, just so you've got an easy link to where to find that information. But as I say, that's just to kind of put it in context of where other performance information is available.
Thank you. What can we do again?
I'm very happy to dive in. So I've got a handful of specific questions. So on page 70, this is how to needs. We have got a large increase in the number of complaints asked in target in the last quarter, which is of course really good to see. How have we managed to do that in the start period?
Thank you. So I think it's widely acknowledged the fact that the performance of complaints within housing needs has not been very good for a sustained period of time. So there has been a particular focus over the last quarter. At the end of quarter 3, what we did was we focused on actually clearing the backlog to bring and at a more manageable amount relevant officers, and month for month there's been a performance focus by the managers and heads of service to ensure that we're engaging and members' inquiries in time. And then what we're also working on as well is not just the actual timeliness, but also the quality to ensure that we are responding to residents and complaints.
Thank you very much, and well done for doing it. My next question is the reverse. I'm afraid, Doug, on page 75. So we've had quite a drop in the percentage answered in the target from 91 down to 62%. What's going on there in this period?
So we changed the system that we were using. We moved to the casework system. And from about the end of November, we've had there's been difficulties in booking in complaints in the right period. So they've been arriving in the service too. That's actually part of it why they've been responded to. That was still a problem parts of April, but I'm told by the team but by the team that they're on top of the queue now and that we're getting it. And we get a report that's sort of batch that out. So we expect normal service to be this year. Okay, because we've never had a dip in that. But if you receive a complaint after the time it's due, then there's an issue. But that's we've told that.
That's assurance. It's quite a dramatic drop, but clearly there's a reason for it, and you're addressing. My other two questions on the previous page, and the housing management arrears as a percentage of the rent roll both appear to have crept up quite significantly above the target. So that's the first question I'd like to comment on, please. And then the bottom right-hand chart, average days to full debt of standard works deployed. We seem to have done well in 22-23. This is only 3-year presentation, but for last year we seem to have gone up quite a bit towards not quite to the level of the year before. It must have been pandemic affected. So that's a good comment on that one, please. So comments on those.
So, sorry.
Sorry, we're not about to
So I don't know if you want to comment on that, so I've got.
Yeah, my assistant director of resident services and rent income, financial inclusion and voids happen to be part of my work. So I think first of all on the rent losses, I think you can definitely see a trajectory that relates to the cost of living increase. We have put lots of mitigations in place to support residents, but people are finding it very, very tough to pay their rent. And it's an area of work which we're expanding the number of advisors that we have, so we're able to support residents, give them that one-to-one support, because often it's not just the rent, there may be other pressures. And part of that support is making sure that people are paying the benefits they're entitled to, that any appeals that need to be done to the DWP are done with support, the whole range of measures. I'm not expecting that figure to come down quickly. I think it will be gradual. As the economy improves, hopefully inflation is going down, people start to have more money in their pockets. I think there's a direct link to that. But we're very sensitive to it. So we've had a couple of evictions recently. But they were really at the very end of what we could do to support people, because we know it's tough. So we don't want to pile additional pressure on people because of that. So it's not great. It's not a great picture, I know, but I think we are in a better position than many other others.
So far and large, arrears have been going up across. There's also the universal credit transition. Yeah. So what we know is, if we're on housing benefits on average, we're actually people are usually on average in universal credit in arrears because they get paid. That does have an impact. But it's been steadily going up. We also did change our IT system last summer, and that has had an impact. We went live on a brand new system. So it will be great in the end, but there were some things.
And the voids.
I have to hold my hands up. This is probably the worst performance we've had for a little while. There are a number of mitigating factors. As you know, managing voids is like a series of moving parts, and they all have to be working together to get the kind of smooth processing. We've had capacity issues with staff sickness and staff performance issues. We have tightened up on our management of contractors. We have dedicated contractors now, which is something we didn't have previously. We've had additional work that has been, in a good way, it's been as a result of the new build and extra pressure on that team to get those viewings and lettings done. So what we're doing, we're in the middle of a restructure to get the right resources in the right places. The head of service post is out for advert at the moment. The new surveyor started today. So I'm really hoping that we start to see a bit of a shift. We're working also more closely with colleagues in European needs. We've always had a good relationship, but getting the timing right on the nominations and getting people viewing properties just before they're ready is a bit of an art, really. So we're trying to perfect our work on a number of fronts in order to drive that figure down. It's not where we want it to be, and to be honest, I feel a bit embarrassed that it is as high as it is at the moment.
I think that's probably a subject we need to come back to the committee. As we've discussed voids in the past. When was it, a year ago, 2 years ago? Most years it comes up, but I can say we had a paper on it. So.
Can I say, Greg, that back in the day when I was first councillor, I had a working group. I chaired a working group on voids. We looked into voids, and actually this strikes me as being quite long at the time. I think I can't remember, but the recommendation was that the time would be shorter. We went round and visited them and all the rest of it. So
it's a complicated subject. The commercial sector would be very surprised at those kind of figures. I think that when I was letting my property when I was away from London, I think the longest void I had was 10 days, which included Christmas and New Year.
the next one. This
They often have to have like new kitchens, new bathrooms,
Yeah,
and be tarted up a bit.
I only do repainting, but yeah, I didn't have to do that. But I do know that is an issue that you do because we discussed that last time.
And sometimes we go into a void and we designate it as a minor, and then work starts, and then there's so much more involved. And also we have to let it in a condition that residents will accept, and sometimes that involves redressing a property, either putting in white goods and things like that. So there's quite a lot to it, but regardless of everything I've said, the figure is too high and we need to drive it down.
I'm sure the committee will come back to it.
Yes.
Councillor North.
Just wanted to look at the homelessness prevention and see the stats there. One of the questions I've got is the outcome is either prevention successful, unsuccessful, or other.
Yeah.
I just wondered what the other was.
So, well, maybe they have moved out, but so I asked the same question and did a bit of a deep dive. So effectively, that could include people who have withdrawn their applications or applications have been cancelled. The way in which this is recorded, central government provides us with a list of explanations as to how you can determine what a relief and a prevention is. Most of them are withdrawn. They, for some reason, do have other categories specific. So I have requested that it gets removed because it should be specifically clear. We should just have withdrawn. But most of them have been either withdrawn or because they've made their own arrangements.
Yeah, thank you. But are we not going to go as far as the conference? Are we on repairs?
No, it's another item, I think.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Ruth.
Just an observation and a quick question. In relation to the housing needs chart, which has the month to end TA arrears balances, I just think it's worth noting, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the figures given are not real figures, so they're not taking into account inflation. So we see in March 2022, the total is about 3.5 million, and March 2024, just over 4 million. We've had 2 years of high inflation, sort of approximately 10% over those years, which equates to about 600,000. So I think it's worth noting that actually in real terms, there's not really been any change at all. It might be worth either stating on these charts whether the figure's real or not, just so it makes more sense. And then my next question is in relation to the resident safety chart. There's statistics in relation to properties with valid manual gas safety certificates. Now, those figures look extremely high, but just considering how important that is and that they're council-owned properties, you know, why would any council-owned property not have a valid gas safety certificate?
So just to be absolutely clear, are you looking at the slide that says housing management at the top or housing need?
Housing management.
Right. Okay. So that's yeah.
So so occasionally people do not let us in. We have to go and get a sports order to get in, and that can sometimes delay. So at any stage, so 99.91. So it's a snapshot in time. So you can see. If you look at the end of quarter 4 from 22-23, you can see it's substantially less than what we had Liberty. And that's when we reported ourselves to the regulator because we knew we had a problem. So it's probably a handful, 4 or 5 residents. Sometimes it gets to 0, and you know, the team sends something around and everyone's happy. But it's only a few days later there'll be ones that go out. Time. We try and do it in advance, clearly, of it. Occasionally, some people, or they've gone. Sometimes people go missing. There's all sorts of stuff that can happen. So it's always a small handful of people, circumstances that make it difficult.
Thank you very much.
Chair, can I just add about Kathleen's first question about the arrears? Coach and I discussed this earlier, and it's seeing if we can get this information as a percentage. All the budgets, because then you'll be able to see it and where we are.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay, so, you know, we're doing a working group into cost. So as part of it, we went to see a hostel in Westminster, which was, you know, an exemplar, I would say. And it was the Edward Alstott Centre in Great Peter Street. So what we were discussing, and I'm looking at the number of rough sleepers here. What we were discussing is Westminster has way and above the most, okay? And that is followed by Camden. And I looked here, we've got here 40. I think we might be undercounting how many rough sleepers we have. And there are different ways. I know there is a general count, isn't there, of London? That is going to help me here. But also in Westminster, they have counts a lot more frequently than we do. So looking at that figure of 40, I think one of the recommendations we're going to do is that we need to count how many we've got in the borough. Because I would say that even me walking from the tube to my house, I see about 4 or 5, and there's always people outside the hospital. There's always people outside the fire station, you know, in King's Road. So 40 seems to me a bit light. And Linda would say that sometimes we don't count people if they're sleeping in a basement or if they're under something.
Okay, so I went out with our rough sleeping team, who I was really impressed with, and they're run by the laboratory sector as well, and our police as well, and our officers. And the COJO will correct me as well and put in extra details, but it's about people who have nowhere to sleep that particular night, not potentially people who may come in to the borough during the daytime, but potentially may come to Knightsbridge and decide, you know, they could potentially beg in Knightsbridge and then go back.
Yeah.
So this specifically at night time, and actually our figures really are quite low, genuinely. And I know COJO will explain a bit more.
Yeah, so council, I'm not sure that we've been by Westminster count more frequently than we do, because we count every month.
So you count every month, okay.
There's an annual count.
And do you?
Happens in November.
Okay, so is it true that if someone's like under something or down in the basement, they don't count? That's what I've been told.
No, so no. So there's specific there's a specific definition as to what a rough sleeper is. So usually it's related to bedding, and the person is actually asleep. If we so I, for example, frequently if I'm out to lunch or when I see somebody outside sleeping off, I do contact our outreach team, and the outreach team are very responsive. And sometimes we get emails from counsellors, and they do go out hours of the day. They also do night checks as well. So, for example, if I get to receive an email from you and you say that you see somebody who's sleeping in the basement, for example, when they attend, that person may have moved on. So, myself and Councillor McVeigh, we did a visit recently, and I saw somebody sleeping at McDonald's, and then within an hour, I asked the team to go and check, and that they were actually sleeping by the time they'd gone there.
You know, it's really difficult. I think
it's quite fluid.
But I was really impressed how the team do know the regular.
They know them.
The regular. I was really impressed. I mean, they all by name. They knew their history. They, you know, and they were particularly trying to find one elderly gentleman who they knew was on their radar, and his sister was really worried about him because he was quite old, and they knew roughly where he'd be, and we were like looking for him. So I think there's a lot of communication amongst all the different agencies and teams.
I think I might say also, because you referred to this in an earlier answer too, that the way that the government collects this data, and obviously one of the things they're doing with that data, the way you've already referred to, is comparing in different locations. In order for that to work, they lay down quite strict rules about how you collect it and what counts and so on. I think I'm right in saying that when you do a count, certainly when I've been involved in the annual count, you literally count the people that you see, but there's then a kind of methodology where you take that number and then you sit down with the team who actually know the borough and know the people, and you kind of make some adjustments to it based on people you know who you might not have seen that night, but who probably do need to be counted as rough sleepers kind of in the period. So the raw number then gets kind of updated to reflect that in line with a very kind of carefully laid down government methodology, and then that's the number that gets submitted and shows up on this graph. So there's a bit of a kind of technical process of translating the kind of the figures you actually record on your clipboard into what then gets submitted to government. But we don't have a great deal of discretion in kind of changing that methodology because it's set down by government in order that they're then comparing like with like across all different local authority areas. Did I got that right?
Absolutely, switching.
So it is actually coming at the moment, it's come down, it's varied a bit. It's gone up and then it's gone down again.
Yeah, but that's overall. That's over the period of quarter. So usually over a specific period, the least we have is around 9. I think when we had our annual plan last year, actually it was 8. The maximum we might see at a particular period of time is 20. But then
on the night.
Yes, on a specific night. So that's over the period.
So where does the figure of 40 come from?
So over the period of a quarter.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So. Thank you.
But what I will say is that if any of you do see somebody sleeping rough, you can contact our outreach team. You can also contact StreetLink, and the team is very responsive to actually go and capture. Most of the entrenched rough sleepers, the team are fully aware of them, even between boroughs.
Yeah, because they move.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So most of them.
Okay.
And can I just add to that, a couple of our churches in our ward and mansion blocks have been reporting this because before they lock up the church, scoot into the disabled toilet and they're in the church all night with the cat. And then mansion blocks, just recently, they tailgate in and then they'll go round the corner. And so it's become, and I've directed them to the outreach team and it has been a successful outcome.
Thank you. So I do have some comments from Councillor Wade, who would like to have a better understanding of the housing department since its recent transformation. Now, I think that might be a larger question than for tonight. It says
struggling with the recent transformation. We're doing this transformation daily basis. Ongoing.
I don't think question specific enough.
I think it's
I think I might say how many members of staff are in the department, how many are specialists, temporary accommodation, older residents, and those being placed by a housing options team from step down. I would like to know what the response times to inquiries for homelessness are. What is the impact on the business of debt? What are the anticipated figures for debt after the increase in service charges?
So perhaps those questions from Councillor Wade. I don't know if the commission chair wants to consider changing what we bring to you. I mean, because if those are items that we want on there.
I think some of Councillor Wade's questions maybe are too large for.
Yes, they'd be specific. That would probably be a paper.
Yes, it would be a separate item.
Whereas this paper, I think all this these drafts, the ones you prepare anyway.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing we want to do is to get you creating another set equally this size specifically for us. I think interpreting what you produce for us is relevant.
And I would also say any councillor at any time who's got a question about the service and how we run it should feel free to contact me or one of these guys and we'll answer it kind of outside of this session.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you. So then I myself had a couple of questions. So first of all, in terms of the stage 2 complaints, do we have any, and we may not, do we have any way of knowing how many of those get referred to the ombudsman or a ombudsman? We do know.
I think you keep those figures on down, you say.
One. Would it be useful for us to have those, do you think, reported to the committee?
Yeah. So
if you have them anyway.
Let me just qualify that. We know how many cases the ombudsman has opened.
Okay.
We don't know how many people have gone to the ombudsman.
And
so
it
that's
has
always open
yeah.
because of course it comes back to us.
Of course, yeah.
You know, so the amount of cases last year that they opened compared to the year before was down. So I think it was 19 and about 30.
And it would be just, I mean, so we know this, maybe we do it, but we work with two different ombudsman services. So
Yes,
those other
exactly.
services overseen by the
Yeah.
Housing Ombudsman, COJO's by the Local Government and Social Council. So it's kind of, there'd be two different numbers we'd be providing.
Yes,
but
that's
we
what I
but we
said,
can track it. Yeah, exactly. We can track it across both.
That would be helpful, I think, to know. Yes,
That changes.
I think I'd like it regularly. If you have it anyway,
We can
why
pop
not
that into the
just add
pack
it
easily.
in?
Yeah.
And Bernadette, you mentioned there've been a couple of evictions lately. Do you feel that, you mentioned cost of living, do you feel that the I'm going to say rented service charge increases had an impact in that? Or is it hard to?
It's really up and down because the reasons why people find themselves in those situations.
So individual.
Yes, I mean, they are multifaceted.
Yeah.
The risk when we've got fewer than 5 is that we might risk going into individual cases in committee rather than talking trends.
Yes, and that's why I'm wondering whether that would be something that would be useful to be reported to the committee. So that, for instance, we could see if there had been a trend.
I think number of evictions would be a
Yes.
very useful thing to see, but it would have to be as a less than 5 as we used to the rental housing. Yes.
Is
in this
that
case.
good? That's encouraging.
And it's absolutely a last resort. It's really, we go to quite considerable measures to try and avoid that outcome transpiring.
Indeed, and yeah, that's why the numbers are so small.
Excellent. That way. Thank you. To say anything?
No, I'm just actually going to back that up because I've got, as councillor they will know, get involved in a case where not only did they go the extra mile, they went one step further to help the person. And unfortunately, it wasn't a good outcome, but I was absolutely astounded by how far and how caring the council were in a difficult situation. So that's it.
And I had just one or two others. So in terms of, and I think I'm looking at page 64. This is housing needs. Homeless relief duty outcome. We've talked about other. We haven't necessarily talked about relief unsuccessful. And I'm wondering what happens in those cases because they're quite larger numbers.
Yeah. So can I sum it in? I had a conversation about this earlier as well. So very, very quickly, the way the homeless legislation works is that advice is considered better than prevention. Prevention is considered better than relief. Relief is considered better than duty. So the higher our prevention numbers are, the better. If there are households who are in the relief duty, that means that we failed to actually prevent their homelessness. A lot of those residents are in temporary accommodation. Now, with the unsuccessful, with the blue ones, the successful ones, that means that whilst they're in temporary accommodation, we've been able to find them alternative accommodation, be it alternative, such as private rented sector or supported housing, or via other social landlord that's not within the borough. With the unsuccessful ones, that will be a mixture of households who we do not have a duty towards, or households who we do have a duty towards, who we are accepting a full housing duty to, and they will be rehoused by our housing register at some point in time. So those are the households who are in temporary accommodation for a sustained period of time until they successfully bid for a property or make a director.
Yes, can I just, because we had a long conversation about it, so kind of the chart on the following page, the Let's by TA, registered provider in housing management. I thought it was interesting because it comes to that point as well. I think particularly, for example, you look at January 2024, there was 91 lets to TA. So that just shows the level of the scale that COJO's team is facing.
Yeah.
And he told me earlier that we've had an 8% increase in homelessness presentations this year, and that is on top of the 17% from the year before. So it's just kind of constant process.
And it shows you that level of inflow that you're seeing in the chart that Councillor Bay just referred to. Shows you what a job it is for the team to keep the graph on the next page, the total in TA level, if you see what, because the team there, I think of it as a bathtub, you know, you've got a tap and a plug hole. You need to keep things moving through because the tap is constantly bringing new households into that. So it's a bit of a running to stand still job, but it makes it enormously important that we're constantly finding ways out of that situation for households and not, as Kojo said, just relying on a social let as being the only way out. Because there just aren't enough social lets to get the food, but so we need to be constantly thinking creatively about private sector options, social let outside the budget, and all those other things that Kojo talks about. In order to keep those numbers even stable. I mean, those numbers are much bigger than any of us would like, but they'd be much bigger if we weren't managing that close in the best way we could.
So these ones, if this was going to be just according to the presentations, the sharp.
It would be very hard,
So.
There's an intervention which help manage the numbers in terms of condition, but also provide a
yeah.
So in terms of homeless presentations, is that something as a committee we think would be useful to know so that we can see the increase? If you have it.
Yeah, no, that's it. So in the last 2 financial years, it's gone up in total by 33%.
Wow.
So there is the top left corner of the slide we were just looking at, that's refund. There's the top left hand corner, there's the total presenting for advice and overall.
Yes.
So is that?
Oh, that one, yeah.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah.
Which page are we on now?
We're on page 64.
I've got the same thing.
Yeah.
So there's it's the very first housing needs graph, and it says demand total presenting for advice and open likeness. So that I think is a measure of the, as it were, people presenting at the front door. Is that the right way to describe it?
Yes, it is. But yes, that's about 16
So when we say it's increased, are we including advice and homeless?
Just the homelessness presentation. Advice maybe they just need advice from us about how they can protect their tenancy.
Yeah.
So the actual homelessness approach is the dark blue one where they're under the government definition of what homelessness is. They're homeless or threatened with homelessness within that 56 days.
Thank you. And in terms of just rounding this item off, we did have an item at OSC the other day about ombudsman finding. And one of the things that was mentioned in that meeting was around PHPs and their in the backlog.
Yeah.
And Mary asked, how would we have picked that up? So I'm wondering whether some sort of measure around delivery of those would be a useful one. Granted, there was an issue around the IT.
Yeah, I think I'm right in saying that as a result of the ombudsman finding, we're now going to be reporting on performance on particularly on the PHP thing on a quarterly basis to each team. Have I got that right?
Yeah, well, yes. So the recommendation.
I beg your pardon, personalised housing plan, which we're statutorily required to provide for anyone that Kojo Service is supporting. That's kind of part of the basis of the Reduction Act.
Yes, exactly. So the recommendation from the Ombudsman was to report into the leadership team about the backlog.
Yeah.
Moving forward, since we was given all of the residents then are getting their PHP. So it's entirely up to the committee.
Well, yeah, I was going to suggest, if we're given that we're producing that quarterly report, at least for the next coming period for the leadership team, why don't we just make sure that the committee has a copy of that too? You see what I mean? Just so that you can see, and that means you don't have to wait till this time next year to see how we're doing. You'll see, given they're providing a leadership team anyway. So it makes sense to you to see it. See it totally.
So I think that's all my questions. I think there was where on page 82, this is now in social investment and property. It might be useful to have some more information or more detailed information around the new homes programme. What do people think about that?
What specifically do you have in mind?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, at the moment, what we have here is target versus forecast. And I'm wondering whether, if there's any way of kind of digging down a bit more deeply into that so that we can understand reasons. I mean, maybe new homes will come as a separate item anyway.
Well, we did have a paper on it quite recently,
Yeah.
which contained a lot of very good information that was examinable, which is why yes, I skipped over this a little bit because we've seen it so recently. But,
It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's a bit different from everything else in the chart list
Yeah.
because it's a kind of it's a delivery program, not a kind of measure of kind of general
yeah.
health of the machine. If you know what I mean. And so I think I'm in the same place as I felt I was like reading between the lines of what you said, Councillor Hammond, but that rather than augmenting this, I wonder whether we probably just need to stay in the place of it never being very far from the front of our mind when we're planning agendas, just to have regular update at least once a year, perhaps more often. So that we, because I think a lot of the information that you're talking about, which is really important, is slightly qualitative in nature.
Yes.
And therefore it would be hard to do justice to it in the context of this kind of report. But I totally recognise the interest that the committee has, and I'm not at all surprised about it. So we just probably need to figure out what the right drumbeat is of updating you on that, with a more detailed report that Christine and the team put together on kind of how it's going in a slightly more general way.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes
I mean,
sense.
we did do a report quite recently,
Yeah.
so I think it might be really good to just have a look at what we did then, and then
Yeah,
if there's
make
any
sure.
area that we can perhaps expand on and give some updates on to come back.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. So if there are no other questions on this paper, so happy to all of you. And we will move on to the agenda item 7, which is the report on the repairs column. So this report provides a summary of the 4th of March 2024 resident conference on repairs, maintenance and upgrades, which formed part of the Housing and Communities Committee annual work programme for 23-24. That concludes this meeting of the Housing and Community Select Committee. No, it doesn't. So we are on agenda item 7. We have on page 83 the report. And I would like to invite Ella to introduce the report.
Okay. Maybe if I signed it, maybe you want me to introduce it?
The process.
As I chaired it. Well, we've read the report, so I don't think we need to spend a huge amount of time on describing it, but I think it was a useful evening. I think everybody in the room was there on the table. I think we missed one member of the committee, but it wasn't somebody who's here tonight. So you all saw it. I think it was extremely useful to get some colour from residents. We had a relatively small number present. I think it's 25 to 30 out of potentially 6,500 households. Nevertheless, what the people we had all had something to say. They gave us some anecdotal information. It was worth hearing that. There were a small enough number that I didn't have to cut anybody off, and we were able to give them all the chance to say their piece. And that was interesting, but we do need to look at it in context that they were a small sample of the whole. We followed it up by going to visit the repairs centre, the call centre. So some of us did. I know you were off sick there on that day and missed an interesting visit. I think those were there. We sat down with the call centre operators, and the lady I was sat with was really impressive in terms of how she was processing the calls she got in, and that was just generally very interesting to watch. And where do we go from here? I think it's a good standalone item that we've done. I think it would be worth getting, and this would be a recommendation for the committee, and we can phrase it. I think we're phrasing it in a minute. I think it would be worth getting quite a comment back from the council executive on each of the main themes that we identified based on what's in this report, and hearing what the executive had to say about it. And that's in the interest of time, what I wanted to say by way of introduction.
Yeah, can I just add, this is an opportunity for the committee to amend or
agree the report and the recommendations, and then it will be sent to the lead member for a formal response. Do we have any comments, thoughts?
It struck me, I mean, shoot, comments, but it struck me at the time that it would help some of the people who ring up if they were allocated a person for them to talk to about this repair, rather than they get put here and then they ring up another day, it's a different person or that sort of thing. I think a point of contact, if they're given a number, they could also be given like a member of staff who would be sort of mainly in charge of their complaint or whatever. I don't know if that's possible.
Let's look at that. I would have thought maybe for major works and that might be possible. I mean, holidays and people being off bills, people being meetings, people being, you know. I mean, ideally, everybody on the team should be able to kind of follow a number through.
I'd like to introduce. I don't think we've made channels. Yeah. So I've asked James to come in so we can hear what the speaker said.
Welcome, James.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm James Carroll. I've met a few of you before, but I'm head of resident safety and repairs. Started at the sort of end of January, I believe. So a few months into the role now. Yeah, take your point. It's something we can definitely explore. As I've just mentioned, so we've got systems in place, CRM, Service Connect. So anybody in the team at any one time should be able to pick up the call and trace the action that was implemented by the previous person they spoke to. That being said, everybody introduces themselves, gives a name and a reference. And if there's a desire to want to speak to that same individual, if they're free and we can accommodate that, then by all means we'll pass that call over. But I believe that anyone in the team should be able to.
But we are looking at where we've got complex damp issues or something like that, having so that would more be a surveyor where often you would have a dedicated person that will look after you.
And I think that comes for most repair jobs once they're passed from housing response team to a supervisor, a surveyor. There'll be an owner of that job. They will then be the point of reference in the main.
Okay.
I would just like to say thank you to Greg and Bella for this excellent paper. I think for the lead member, it's hopefully going to be really useful. What I think is excellent about it is the way that it's structured and what it gives in terms of usable information, regardless of whether the numbers were relatively small. We still heard a lot of really useful information from residents, and the way this information is being arranged, I think, is really helpful. That you have under each of the topics, you've got the summary of the issues, and you've got some suggestions. So hopefully these are going to be actionable and helpful. So thank you to Greg and thank you to Bella.
It was actually some of the residents did come up with some really constructive suggestions. So whether they're usable or not, I don't know, but they sound good to me as a non-expert. So definitely worth the comment.
Worth taking on board. And definitely worthwhile, I think, from the residents' point of view, that there's a channel for values to be fed to.
So we will, so just clarifying, Chair and Bella, you're agreeing that this is the final report, and then Doug and his team will respond to the suggestions and.
Yeah.
Yes. We agree that, yes. Yeah, thank you. So then we can move to agenda item 8. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you. So this is the Select Committee Work Programme. Sally, would you like to introduce?
Yes, so this is the work programme. In Appendix 2, you can see I have themed all the items that we've had over the past year, so you can see everything we've looked at. And then this is an opportunity to suggest any items for the new municipal year. And we're having a meeting on the 10th of June, I believe, is the Housing Communities workshop. And where we'll look at a long list of items and narrow it down to see what we want to look at in the next year. So if people don't have something on the top of their head right now, you can email me before then, and we'll add it to the long list.
I think this has been a call for generally to scrutiny at rbkc.gov.uk.
Yeah.
So I think I've put something this afternoon to that email, to that address, as opposed to a specific officer.
Yes, so there was an email to all councillors to put forward ideas to any of the scrutiny committees. But what Bella's referring to is in terms of this committee specifically. I think it's a workshop, isn't it, on the 10th?
Yes, it's
but
all councillors will be able to attend, but we definitely want a committee.
Of course.
Also new committee.
Yeah, a new committee. But so residents can suggest items for scrutiny. There is quite a good scrutiny page on the website, but the address is also scrutiny@rbkc.gov.uk. Does anyone have any particular suggestions they'd like to mention now, or shall we leave that? Think about that. Yes.
Workshop. I think.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So I think we are now at the point where we can say, or we can be about to say, that this concludes the meeting. Before I do, I would like to say a thank you to all committee members, as it's the last meeting of this municipal year, and especially extend my thanks to the excellent Vice Chair, Councillor Hammond. Thank you everyone for all your hard work.
Thank you, Greg, and also thank you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Claire, for your chairmanship over the last 2 years, and to everybody who's been on the committee, and my last one after 4 years before I moved committee. So it's been a pleasure working here.
It's been a pleasure. Yeah.
And so saying, that does conclude the meeting. Thank you to everybody, and hopefully see you next time.
Let's do it. We finished.
Yeah. Well done.
So it's only me here, so we might as well fix a harmony.